Thanks, John. That was very important that we heard those messages. My friends up the back might put my presentation on if that's okay with them. Most of you know me as Ian MacDonald or Macca, but today I want to let you in on a little secret. I want to announce for the first time that I'm really a time traveller. I come from the year 2218, 100 years' time. Humanity sent me back. Yeah, okay, whatever. Hey, don't ruin the joke, you guys. Anyway, it's good to see some of you can count. Anyway, back to the story. Humanity has sent me back. For what reason? I always said I'll be back, and that's to stop Skynet. That's so that in, whatever it is, 2218, I'm not speaking to a room of 600 robots. Because that's what we're facing, and that's the start of my campaign today. Provided this works. That's not me. That's not me. Am I going the wrong way? There I am. Now, some of this I'm going to read because it's very important. It was spoken by my forefathers back in 2218. And I want to talk about today about two things. The first thing is robotics, which you can read it there, but it's the interdisciplinary branch of engineering and science. It includes mechanical engineering, electronics engineering, computer science. Robotics means autonomous buses. See that photo down the bottom there? You see that little bus? A lot of times that's a robot. Do you understand that? Humanics is not a word that you see very often, but it's a word I'm going to talk about a lot today. That's the study or the subject of human affairs or relations, especially of the human element of a problem or situation as opposed to mechanics or mechanical. We're humanics. We're all part of humanics, all of us. So we already know some of this is quite, I'll allow you to read it and I'll praise it. It's really what we know about the phenomenon now. It's here. We've heard talks yesterday. We heard some people joking about what it might do, and we've talked about, whether, and as JR talked about, whether a autonomous bus or an autonomous vehicle would run over a bunch of kangaroos, or whether you'd be able to sleep in your car while it takes you hither or thither. But nevertheless, Australia, believe it or not, is at the forefront of technology. I think we heard that yesterday as well. But what we haven't heard a lot about is the significant transitional period in the replacement of humans and vehicles. What we haven't heard a lot about is, do you have a human on one of these vehicles? And if the human is on one of these vehicles, what does the human do? Now, a number of you are tendering, and you know that in different states they have different views on what the person should be, whether the person should be a supervisor, whether the person should be an attendant, or whether the person should just sit there and watch what's happening happen. That raises so many questions about what that person would do on the vehicle. If that person's on the vehicle, how are they trained? Are they trained to sit comfortably on a seat so they don't get a sore backside? If it's their call to push the button, the lucky ones, can you imagine, do I hit the passenger or do I hit the pedestrian, or do I allow a passenger to survive? I've got that right. I've got the power of God in my little finger as to what I do. What do we pay them, for instance? What award do we pay them under? What sort of training do they need? Do they need accreditation? None of that's thought through, and this is where I endorse what APSI was talking about in relation to where BIC sits in all of this and where you sit in all of this, and that is where we have an opportunity to actually put our stamp on how we think this should go. And I ask you never to lose sight of the fact of humanics, never lose sight of the fact of humanics in this transition to autonomous vehicles. There is a case for autonomous vehicles, and I've outlined it there, and again I'll only précis it, but what I can say to you is that there is an organisation called the Australian and New Zealand Driverless Vehicle Initiative, ADVI. It's the peak industry advisory body that services the wide ecosystem of automated vehicles across Australia and New Zealand. I'm taking this from their website. Every man and their dog are a member of this organisation, believe it or not. All the state transport departments are members. All the airports are members. All the universities, all the academics have jumped on the bandwagon. They're members of it. Major suppliers are also members of it. Perhaps we should be members of it, just to actually bring some balance into what they're trying to create. And that's what they're trying to create. They're trying to create robots and they're wanting to replace you. Australia signed up to this as a global leader of driverless vehicles. We are at the forefront. Australia, heaven knows why. There are so many other things we need to be doing, improving infrastructure and the like, without being at the forefront of driverless vehicles. They say there is a $95 billion a year benefit in having autonomous vehicles. That's right, the entire workforce no longer works, but imagine what the social welfare bill will be. There is a case against it as well, and there are some carnage or doomsday profiteers out there that I've highlighted there. Wolf Richter from the Wolf Street blog in New York, he certainly believes autonomous vehicles introduction will reap carnage on the labour force. It'll substantially reduce and cause people to go into retrained, unsuitable jobs. Can you imagine trying to get currently a bus driver of 65 years of age to retrain as a something else? Something else? I hate to think what they think that something else is. So do we think the millennials are going to start sitting in autonomous vehicles and pressing a button? Not likely. We can't get young people into our industry now. Why would you think we could get young people into our industry where they don't even have to drive? What we're seeing is a collective coming forward. Not only are people being sent back from 2218, such as myself, as terminators to stop Skynet from ever being invented, there are people out there now, collectives of workers, who are saying, let's rethink this automisation, let's recognise that people will lose their jobs, let's recognise that real families will get hurt. Even if in the abstract other jobs are created, people will get hurt. Let's look after humans first, let's be humanic before we become robotic. Michael Caine, the National Secretary of the TWU, has already cited in that Future of Work report that APSI talked about that an early clear example of future of work is the digital platforms, which is only designed to circumvent protection for workers. Because you know what all of you are going to do by 2218 in the world I came from? You ride bikes for Uber Eats, you deliver food to people and oil to robots. That's how you do it. There will be future jobs. They say the making of robots is going to be one of the biggest industries around, because everyone's going to have a robot. But you know what happens? Eventually the robots figure out how to make themselves, and that job becomes redundant as well. Are you getting the drift of my campaign? So BIC could be our saviour. I've put two quotes there that BIC had put in to the submissions that it made to the Lower House Select Committee, and it was quoted in the reports, which I'm pleased to say. But as APSI appropriately said, these reports go into the bottom drawer and they stay there unless somebody tries to initiate getting them out of the bottom drawer and actually thought about. The pollies know nothing about the concepts of humanics, and it's only when you keep pushing and lobbying to try to get humanics as part of our social outlook and our political outlook that things happen. So what BIC has said is the introduction of driverless buses in the mass transit trunk services segment, if accepted by the community, will cause a reduction in the existing driver workforce. I'm sure you agree with that. They also went on to say the transition to the new driverless technology will need to be managed in a way that provides for an ageing workforce to be naturally retired or retrained to take in new roles that will emerge. We don't know what those new roles are. I talked to you about what role a human would play in an autonomous vehicle. It's argued that we have humans in these autonomous vehicles, which makes them not really autonomous, but human-related autonomous vehicles. I've put in that bottom quote there, or bottom note, there are a whole range of issues like what's the job description, the wage conditions, training, the accreditation. What it's been shown though with reallocation of work, particularly in the autonomous area, is that the jobs that are offered lower paid, lesser job skilled requirements, and they actually diminish the nature of the workforce, not support the nature of the workforce. But so you can get to morning tea with a whole range of concerns and issues, and so I don't zap you with my 2218 ray gun, I want to put this burning question to you. How does the new technology earn a social licence to overcome the widely accepted general discomfort some may feel about having a robot or a computer take control of their mode of transport? I would have asked that question yesterday of Professor Curry, but it would have stolen the thunder from my little talk today. That is, when does an autonomous vehicle no longer require a human on board? I want to leave you with some thoughts in relation to that. And I want to turn your attention to January the 15th, 2009. Is that me? That's from 2218 saying, shut the hell up. You weren't supposed to tell them for another 50 years who you were. Anyway, I used today, so there you have it. So on the 15th of January 2019, US Airways Airbus A320, whilst taking off from LaGuardia Airport, New York, flew into a flock of geese which knocked out the engines. Okay, anyone seen the movie? It's a champion movie, isn't it? The onboard automation algorithms of the Airbus A320 could not provide a safe landing for the disabled aircraft and resigned the passengers and crew to a crash landing and certain demise. So what happened? A human, Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, took over manual controls and landed the aircraft on the water in what became known as the Miracle on the Hudson. It chokes me up every time I read that, and I wrote that myself. It still chokes me up. So I therefore ask you, do we need humans in autonomous transport? Well, Boeing, the largest manufacturer of airplanes in the world, that incident on the US Airbus A320 prompted the Vice President for Production Development at Boeing to state, automation won't be applied until our planes are as adept at handling a mid-air crisis as that confronted by Captain Chesley Sullenberger. I would put to you that in 2218, humanity asked me to come back to 2018 to give you that message. And I want Sully to have the last words. In America, the Department of Transport has established an autonomous committee. Sully is a member of that committee, and these are two quotes that I want to leave with you. He said, "We have to account for what we cannot know yet. put them up. We have to account for what we cannot know yet. We have to allow for the unknown unknowns, and we have to decide if there will be the possibility of human intervention in case technology isn't doing what we want or what is best for the situation. So he says we must try and know what we don't know now before we remove human intervention, because technology doesn't supply all the answers. He then went on to say technology has to be so good, so resilient, so adaptable, so reliable that human intervention is never necessary. We're not there yet. We won't be there yet for a long time. He says that's a very, very high bar. The more you take humans out of engagement with the process, the less likely you will be able to intervene. If that's the case, then you must make it so that they never have to. That's my position in relation to autonomous vehicles. Oops. But just to leave you with some brevity, have you heard the one about the robot who walks into a bar and orders a drink? He lays down some cash. The bartender says, "Hey, we don't serve robots." And the robot says, "Oh, but someday you will. Not if I can help it." What about this other one? I reckon this is even better. The lazy or busy future dog owner could load their dog into a driverless vehicle at home and send it off to a dog park. No more for the owner walking the dog. I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and I'll personally deal with each one of you who doesn't support my view in relation to the matter. I'd like to thank APSI and JR for assisting me in this topic of driverless vehicles. We now have morning tea. Please enjoy that and be back nice and early, because we've got two outstanding industrial relations speakers to talk about essential services and public transport being an essential service. Thank you for listening this morning.